right. Hello. All right, good evening. Do we still have some folks needing seats? Do we have some extra seats somewhere? If we do we need those? Okay. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you for coming this evening and spending time with us. Giving us some of your evening tonight is wonderful for us. I'm Judy Brownell with Centerpoint, and I am going to kind of give you the roadmap of what to expect tonight so you'll kind of know what's happening and when. This is the first in a series of 3 forums that we will have on this issue. The second will be January the 23rd, and it will be on Gateway. Gateway can be the first drug used, the age a child starts, a place, a time. The third one will dig deeper into recovery and treatment and trauma and sort of the hope of all of this. That will be announced at some other time. So for tonight, we will begin. We will respect your time. We will end at 8. So we will not take breaks. So if you need to leave, certainly you can get up and leave. That's fine. If you would, right now, silence all your phones. I feel like I'm really in the theater. Silence all your phones. We want to start by recognizing some people with us this evening. And as I call your name, please just raise your hand for just a second or stand, just so folks know that you are here. Senator Butch Miller. All right. Representative Emery Donahue. Representative Matt Dubnik. Where's Matt? Okay, I saw Matt over there. Mayor Danny Donegan is here. Is Danny here? Okay. All right, thank you. Senator Renee Unterman is right here. She's from Beaufort, and she has been very supportive of this effort in the state, so thank you. Thank you for coming up. Joel Katz with Congressman Doug Collins. Where is Joel? Okay, Joel's there. Chief Carol Martin. Where is Carol? Where's Chief Martin? Okay, you can't hide. She and Sheriff Couch could not be with us this night, but they are really on the front lines of all of this. So we appreciate what you've done, and Carol is actually the one that sort of got all this started that you're seeing tonight. What happened was there are a group of us, and it's called the Partnership for Drug-Free Hall. My partnership people now keep raising hands. Let's do that for just a second. Over and above all their other jobs, all their other responsibilities, we got together and decided that it was time for this community to have information and awareness and what to do and be, in those positions. So that's what we have done, and we will do the other series and others as they come up. Ricky Rich, where's Ricky? Assigned Ricky Rich. He is the Deputy Commissioner for Driver Services and has been very instrumental in getting naloxone into law enforcement. So thank you for your efforts. Now, if you would open your folders, I'm going to kind of guide you through your folders. And I'm going to show you the pieces of paper first, and I'm going to come back to the program. You will have in this side, you have a vendor list. Now, I hope you get the opportunity to check in with vendors as they're here, but if you don't, their information is here. And if you would, for us, there's this piece of paper with the little circles. This is our evaluation sheet. If you would please do this before you leave, there'll be a wire box out there to put these in. This helps us to know what we're doing, what we need to do, just a communication tool for us. This piece of information is very valuable. It tells you what are some opioids, and I've had that question, what are opioids? So it gives you the prescription names, how it works, how the overdose occurs, and how it kills. And on the back it gives you 3 steps to save a life that you'll hear about later in the program. This card is important. And again, remember I said that we're real respectful of your time. We aren't going to take questions from the audience tonight because there's so much good information that we want you to have access to. But if you have a question, please put it on this card and leave it in another box out there. And what we're going to do, give us till October the 15th. We have a website that is listed on the back of the program, drugfreehall.org. We will get them answered by experts in this community and have them posted. And give me that kind of time because I want the best answers to your questions. So stay with the program. you will see the people who will be presenting information this evening, but I wanted to draw your attention to one part. Down at the very bottom, it says Saving a Life. With us tonight, we are privileged to have the Gainesville Theater Alliance doing a production for us. Dallas will talk about ways to save a life, then you will see it. And it is a production written and produced by Jim Hammond and the Gainesville Theater Alliance. So we are very grateful to them for what they have done tonight. So with that, I will let us start the program. And Deb Bailey, she is with Northeast Georgia. She is the Executive Director for Government Affairs. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you so much for being here. And a special thank you to Senator Butch Miller, Senator Renee Unterman, Emery Donahue, and Matt Dubnik, because it is their legislation that allows us to do a lot of the things that you will see tonight. So first, we're going to begin on the scope of the epidemic problem. The Surgeon General of the United States, when he was selected to be Surgeon General, he went home to his hospital. He wanted the nurses to know that he had been promoted to this wonderful new position. And they said, well, that's all well and good, but if there's one thing that we want you to do, we want you to do something about the addiction problem in the United States. And he failed. And now we have a new president. He's been replaced, and the new president has determined the opioid crisis in the United States is considered a national emergency. This is a national, state, and local problem. The United States comprises 5% of the world's population, and we take 80% of the drugs and 99% of the hydrocodone. We lead the world in illegal drug use. We have to ask ourselves, when did the United States become the most painful nation in the world? When did we become one nation under drugs? The national opioid overdose epidemic is taking lives on a daily basis. 52,000 lives in 2015. It is estimated that this will cost the United States nearly $80 billion in American economy. 1/3 of all people that apply for the jobs that you have in your businesses now fail their drug test. And someone dies in the United States every 16 minutes. I wrote this presentation 2 weeks ago, and it was 17 minutes. That means from the time that we have walked in this theater, we have lost someone to an overdose. Drugs now kill more people than cars, guns, and falls. I travel down 85, as many of you do, very often, 985. And if you do, you see an electronic sign over 985, and it tells you how many lives have been lost in Georgia on our highways. When you drive home this evening, or the next time that you're on 985, you look at that sign and you know more people have lost their lives from drug overdoses than have lost their life on the highway in Georgia. Deaths are rising faster than ever. In 2016, they've exceeded 59,000. Evidence suggests the problem in 2017 has continued to worsen. 2 million Americans are estimated to be dependent upon opioids, and an additional 95 million people use prescription painkillers. So as you go out this evening and tomorrow, when you see someone on the street using tobacco, you see them smoking or using a tobacco product, no, more people use painkillers than use tobacco. The current statistics in Georgia, unfortunately, Georgia is in the top 11 states with the most prescription overdose deaths. Now more than 1,400 deaths to overdose. And the map looked like this in 2015. And if you look at that red zone, you know that is our home, folks. We've talked about what this looks like nationally. We've talked about what this looks like statewide. Let's talk about what it looks like here. This is what it looks like. This happened in Gainesville just recently. The numbers that you're seeing there, 2015, 281 overdoses at Northeast Georgia Medical Center in the Gainesville and Brazelton campus. In 2016, that rose to 696. Right now, with that trajectory, we're having 63 a month, which would be over 750 overdoses in our community. What that means is that 1 in 4 people that are seen in primary care settings are now becoming dependent upon opioids. Over 300% increase in prescriptions written, with no change in overall pain reported. Almost 250 million prescriptions were written in 2013, and I use that date because that's the date where at that time a prescription was written for every adult in the United States, or equal to every adult in the United States. We lose 58,000 people a year. That's a Vietnam War. In all the period of the Vietnam War, when we lost our brave soldiers, our men and women across the United States, we lose the same number of brave men and women to the opioid epidemic. I would say at this point we have a plague in the United States. This is one of the last plagues that was in the United States. And if you look at this map, you see it's over 5 decades that you see here. And each point is a death. Let's look at the overdose plague. This is 1995. And this is 15 years later. Do you think we have a plague, folks? Again, let's look at that just for comparison. It has been said that the epidemic has no face. It has a face. It's the faces of the people that look just like us in this room tonight. They look like Lisa Marie. They look like Jason. And they look like Joseph. But let's talk about the impact of the special populations in our environment. What we know is that 2,500 teens try prescription drugs for the first time each day. 90% of all addictions begin in those teenage years. And 27% of the teens and 16% of the parents think and believe that prescription drugs are not as bad as street drugs. Women are also a part of that special population that we're talking about. They're more likely to have chronic pain and be prescribed prescription drugs. And as you can see, the increase in women is significantly greater. But let's talk about this face. We have said it has no face. This is the face of drug addiction. This is what our babies, this is what our neonatal intensive care units across the United States and at Northeast Georgia Medical Center looks like. They look like an unconsolable newborn. 1 in every 4 women that come to deliver a baby now have some form of opioid in their body. I'm not saying that they are addicted at that point, but if they are, then their baby looks like this. And let's talk about this, because these babies are in our neonatal intensive care unit in Gainesville, and the average length of stay for a newborn is 2 days. These babies stay 30 days because they're on methadone. And the forecast is even worse. If this does not change, if we do not turn this around, we know that the toll could be over 250 deaths a day. Experts predict this could increase by 35% between 2015 and 2017. And under the gravest scenarios, predictions are that it could triple to 93,000 deaths a year. So, what does this really look like? I'm going to show you what it looks like. Here is what an ordinary week looks like in extraordinary times. These are not fiction numbers. These are our neighborhoods across the United States. We are going to look at 1 week, the week of July the 10th through the 17th. And these are real, folks. Here's Monday. I just walked in and my buddy, he's not breathing. I think he's overdosed. At the end of Monday, 20 overdoses, 4 deaths. Tuesday, don't let this destroy you. The end of Tuesday, 18 overdoses and 2 deaths. Wednesday, and the end of Wednesday, 25 overdoses and 3 deaths. Thursday, and the end of day Thursday, 33 overdoses and 1 death. Friday, she looked bad. She didn't look like my mama. And Friday, the end of the day, 27 overdoses, 3 deaths. Saturday, this is a war. There are casualties. End of day Saturday, 31 overdoses, no deaths. And Sunday, there are no perfect people. It's important to understand we all make mistakes. 26 overdoses and 5 deaths. This is what an epidemic looks like in the United States, in communities across our great land. I will finish this evening with a quote from a recovery person. in their perspective, and I quote, "After a childhood of not being able to trust a soul, I met a drug I trusted completely. I followed that drug for decades through life's dark paths until one day it walked me into the deepest, darkest woods and extinguished the light. For years, I remained in darkness, angry at the betrayal, until I realized it did not leave me in the dark. It left me searching for my own light, and I have been eternally grateful." Thank you so much for your attention and being here tonight. It is now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Susan Blank.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's a bit overwhelming, and I'm very grateful that those of you are willing to come and spend a few minutes to think about this disease. There we go. We're going to talk about the disease of addiction, and this is a challenging topic to try and address in a very short period of time. One of the things I think that's important to understand, first of all, is that not everyone who uses drugs or alcohol or has addictive behaviors actually has the disease of addiction. Not everybody who dies, not everybody who gets arrested, not everybody who has problems ends up with a diagnosis of the disease of addiction. But for the vast majority of people who live a life of slavery, and I'm using that word intentionally, live a life of slavery because of drugs, alcohol, and other behaviors, this disease is a challenge. We use a lot of different terms to call and refer to this disease. We're the only specialty in medicine that I'm aware of that can't decide what we call the person we treat. Are they patients? Are they consumers? Are they what are they? What do we call what we treat? Is it drug abuse? Is it drug dependence? Is it substance use disorder? Is it the disease of addiction? I prefer that term, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I'm going to use as our background to help us understand this disease, because I do want you, if there's only one thing that you remember as you leave here tonight, it's that this is a childhood brain disease. And this disease is defined by the American Society of Addiction Medicine as a primary disease. It is not a disease, as many of my other psychiatrist colleagues like to talk about, a disease in which, well, if we could just help this person not be depressed, or if we could just control their anxiety, then they wouldn't need to drink or use drugs. Now, certainly, many people drink and use drugs because they're depressed, but guess what? Just as many use them because it's a good time and I'm having a great day and this is a wonderful party and let's take it to the next level. There are certainly contributing factors and we have to think about that, but this is a primary disease. This is a primary disease like diabetes, like hypertension. This is a primary chronic brain disease. To think that you can go to a detox for 3 to 7 days, to think that you can go to a residential treatment center for 30 days and you're going to be good to go, problem solved, never have to face this again, is not realistic. We have to rethink and address this very big problem, which is we think of this as let's send our loved one off for treatment and then they're going to be just fine. No, this is a chronic disease. We cannot cure it, but we can manage it. It is also involving various pathways in the brain. This isn't a person who is weak-willed or has a character flaw or doesn't care or isn't trying. These are, the disease of addiction involves specific pathways in the brain. The reward pathway, that's what gets you hooked. And that's another important point for families and for loved ones to understand. Yes, when people begin using drugs, particularly opiates, they get high. They do. But that's the hook. That gets them started. By the time they're using on a daily basis, by the time it is really impacting their life, this is a disease that no longer makes them high. They're not high. They're not having a good time. They are trying to feel normal. They're trying to not be sick. So the reward pathway gets you going, the motivational pathway, and the learning and memory pathways, which should be coming up next. Yikes. I think we have a dead battery. Anyway, let's keep going. The reward pathways get you going. Motivation, that's our what makes it so that that's all I want to think about. The example I like to use about this is ice cream. Anybody here eat ice cream before? Is there anyone who is really opposed to ice cream? Please? Okay. So, as a kid, I remember eating ice cream, and guess what? I really quite like it. And when that sugar, which is the only food substance that we know of that we are genetically programmed to seek, it's the only one that releases that pleasure chemical dopamine. So I remember eating ice cream, and then, whoa, one day there's this goofy-looking truck that comes driving down the street, playing this kind of monotonous and a little bit annoying song. And all of my friends are suddenly not interested in the game we're playing, and they don't want to talk to me. They're running home, and they're trying to get their mother to give them 25 cents so that they can go and get, I'm old, so 25 cents would get you a lot of ice cream in those days. So I remember looking at that and thinking, isn't that interesting? Now that's the motivation, that's the salient. Suddenly, playing is no longer important. I wasn't hungry, I wasn't thinking about ice cream, but the minute I heard that sound, the minute that I had that thought about ice cream, suddenly that's all that was important to me. Not my friends, not my family, not finishing the game. That wasn't important. What was important was getting that ice cream. And so when we think about the compulsion, that motivation, that continued to drive to do something in spite of consequences, that's what we mean by the disease of addiction. The other important point to understand is that before I knew ice cream, that truck had no meaning for me, right? That looked like any other delivery truck coming in the neighborhood. But suddenly that ice cream truck has profound meaning. And suddenly, thank you, somebody turned my slides on. So these are the pathways in the brain, and this learning part of it is really important because now I am associating ice cream with that little jingle. I'm associating it with this truck. And suddenly, just thinking about that, my brain releases a little bit of the reward dopamine, and I am highly motivated to go do whatever I need to do to get my mother to give me that quarter so that I can get ice cream. That's probably a situation most of us have found ourselves in. It's not so far removed from what people with the disease of addiction are struggling with. And that is that the pleasure center got stimulated by something. Now it gets associated with all kinds of things that didn't used to have anything to do with ice cream. or with the drug they're using. And now suddenly we know that this individual is associating all of these things, and that's the primary thing that brings them pleasure. That's the primary thing that makes them want to not choose their family, not choose their freedom or their health or their loved ones or their job or their school. These are not stupid people. These are not people that don't know better, that haven't delayed gratification in their lives. That's not what's happening. This is a childhood brain disease. It's genetically inherited. About 60% of the reason for having addiction comes from your genes. So you really need to know about your family and your family history. And it's really, we've lost this topic, so good luck trying to keep up with me. What I'd like you to do, yes, it leads to all of these problems. But we need to know our family history, because the difficulty is that if we don't know, we can't be prepared. We need to talk to our children. If we have family history, if we have loved ones who are alcoholics or who have had disordered eating or workaholics, that needs to be shared, because all of these things are a part of what happens for people with the disease of addiction. It doesn't all look the same, but the genetics are very strong. Then you have to have exposure to the substance, and then you have to have something in your life that keeps you motivated to keep using. So, if you could skip forward. So we got the reward pathways. Keep going. Yeah. We can't control the behavior. We have cravings. And we don't recognize, this is a really important thing. I have a patient who is a psychiatrist. Now, let me tell you, psychiatrists are the hardest patients to treat. And he explained addiction in his life as a delusional disorder. He said, my thinking is so messed up when I'm active in this disease, because I think this bottle is my solution. This bottle is what helps me cope with my spouse. And that policeman was out to get me. That policeman was out to get me. And my boss, if you had my boss, you'd drink too. All of these problems that I'm having, this is how I cope. Now, and everybody else looking in, they can clearly see, well, you wouldn't have trouble with your spouse or the policeman or your boss or anybody else if you would put down that bottle. They can't understand it in the same way. Their thinking is different, and they have a dysfunctional emotional response. When you try and talk to them, do they say, oh, thank you. I really appreciate your concern. That's so nice of you to try and get me into treatment. Oh, no, that's not what you're going to hear. You're going to hear, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the next section, you're going to hear the great battle that's raging inside them and then comes out and rages between you and them in terms of trying to preserve this one thing that feels life-saving. We know that this is a chronic disease, that it's not going to be a one and done and you're all done and you're not going to have problems again. It involves periods of relapse, just like, and next slide please, other chronic diseases. Addiction doesn't have any more relapses than diabetes or hypertension or asthma. Next, please. What we know, though, is that people who have this genetically inherited childhood disease need to be involved in some type of recovery treatment, because addiction is progressive. And it's not going to get better, it's going to get worse without treatment, and it can cause premature death and disability. Next slide. So, this is our brain cut in half. This brain is looking this way. The other side is the back of the head. The two areas that you see highlighted, the ventral tegmental area and the nucleus accumbens, these are the two sites that back in 1980, Candace Pert and her group at the NIH When they discovered the opiate receptor, they discovered these particular drugs release this pleasure chemical, dopamine. But we've since learned a whole lot more. So start clicking for me, please. So we know that chocolate, marijuana, LSD, and alcohol all release GABA, which is a pleasure chemical as well. And we know that the stimulants release on one side and that depressants release on the other. The take-home message from this slide is, I used to talk about the 3 gateway drugs. I now have to talk about 4. I used to talk about alcohol and marijuana and tobacco as being the gateway drugs. But now we know that whether you like uppers or downers, you're going to like heroin, tobacco, marijuana, and nicotine. I didn't used to have to talk about heroin as being a gateway drug. But we know that now 20% of folks who use opiates start with heroin. They don't start with the prescription drugs anymore. They're going right to heroin. It's very socially acceptable, it's readily available, and it's inexpensive. Next slide. So the take-home message is addiction is a genetically inherited childhood disease. You see the antecedents in childhood well before you see the person pick up drugs or alcohol. You see the kid that likes to take the dare. You see the kid seeking altered states. They want to spin really fast on the merry-go-round. They want to hang upside down. They want to run really fast. They often are either the overachieving in terms of getting in trouble, or they are the overachievers in terms of having a lot of anxiety. But we know it's inherited. We can't cure it. Not yet. There's some very interesting work being done. But what we can do is manage it. Treatment does help people. We can manage this potentially lethal disease. Treatment works and recovery is possible. And our next speaker, Mr. Nix, is a prime example of just what I'm talking about when I say recovery is possible and treatment works. Thank you. Mr. Nix?
Jeez, there's a lot of y'all. My name is Avery Nix. I'm a person in long-term recovery, recovered heroin addict. Apparently I was born an addict. My childhood, I did a lot of that spinning stuff. I just learned something about myself. Had no idea. I just spun around in circles all the time. God, it's so good to see all y'all, and y'all come out and support the community. We really appreciate it. So yeah, it is. It's a genetic disposition. I think I was born with it. I'm just going to share a little of my experience, strength, and hope, and hopefully y'all can relate, or you know people that can relate. My childhood was pretty normal, guys. I grew up in North Hall area, went to Claremont High. No. From Claremont, Georgia, big town, about 20 minutes north of Gainesville. And yeah, my childhood was pretty normal. I like UGA football, right? My family I come from a pretty good line of addicts and alcoholics, and my family environment as a kid, I had everything that I could want as a kid, everything that I needed. I was sheltered, everything was fine. One thing wasn't okay with me, and I knew that really early on. There was this kind of nervous disposition that kind of was going on. I was constantly seeking other things to change the way I felt. Went to Walking Mountain Elementary School. Everything was fine. I was always the guy to try to fit in. I was the funny guy in school. I was doing all these things to, alter my mood. My first experience with drugs was morphine. I was about 12 years old. I claimed to be a big skateboarder, longboarder, snowboarder. I like to do all those kind of things. Everybody at 12 years old, any guy is a future Tony Hawk. So that's just what I was. So I broke my arm, went to the doctor. Anybody broke their arm in here? Anybody broke something? Okay, so y'all all familiar. When they go to the doctor, when you go to the hospital or whatever, they put a tourniquet around your arm and they go to set your arm, hit you with morphine. They go to set your arm. Guys, I was 12 years old, and I'll never forget when they released that tourniquet. It was all that nervousness, all that disposition, all that noise that's going on. And I promise you, every addict's life that you know, every alcoholic's life that you know, went away at that moment. It was the first time that I felt relief, felt connected, felt okay with me. And then I passed out. I mean, I was 5 seconds. But at that moment, I got all that clarity. Hindsight's 20/20. So anyway, I had already begun to manipulate my folks for Tylenol 3 at 12 years old. Had the cast, everything was good, and I'm like skateboarding down Holly Springs Road in Claremont, with a broken arm because I'm all hyped up on Tylenol 3. That's just how it was. I get the adverse effect to a lot of different substances, so I got a lot of pep from that, a lot of energy. So I started high school. About 14, went to North Hall High, played football, Bob Christmas era, right? Big Bob, he's a great guy, phenomenal coach, and that whole program there at North Hall. I got introduced to Oxycontin. I was about 15. It was homecoming, and just your normal homecoming night, I guess. We had our homecoming game Friday night. I think we beat Chestatee. It was a really good night. It was Saturday afternoon. The girlfriend at the time, she was getting ready to go do her thing for homecoming. Everybody was getting ready. We're all about to meet up at, a buddy of mine's house, and everybody's about to take homecoming pictures and stuff. And because of my, how do I put this? Terminal uniqueness, okay? I wanted to be the guy to supply the alcohol for pregame, for homecoming, right? 15 years old. And so I'm calling my buddies who I thought were out there already, and I asked them, and they said, dude, how about you get some of this Oxycontin? They were OC20s at the time before they were abuse-proof. And he said, how about you get some Oxycontin, and you'll be able to lay under the radar. It'll be cool, no big deal. And at this point, I'd already smoked some weed and drank, so I thought, why not? This would be cool. So that's what I did. I took a half of one. That same feeling 3 years prior to that, with the morphine when I broke my arm, came right back, dude. I got connected. All of a sudden, everything was okay again. Everything was okay in the world. I was connected with the people I was around. I was popular again. I was in the zone. And that's how it was. So I ran with that. At North Hall, football kind of kept me centered. If any of y'all are familiar with Minnesota, there was a lot of consequences if you were going to use and drink and stuff. So the consequences at the time were too great for me to really want to continue to use all the time. So football really kept me centered. It also altered my mood because I enjoyed the small town fame. I enjoyed being in the paper every Friday. Apparently I still do. So it worked out really well for the most part. When football was over with, my using and my addiction had progressed. Susan, she told it Blake, Dr. Blank did. At about, between 17 and 18 years old, football was getting over with, graduated in 2009, and at this point, I'm using intravenously. I was drinking pretty heavily, 4 nights a week at least, using benzodiazepines, Xanax, Valium, Klonopin, things like that. And really just doing whatever I could to stay high. At that point, all my friends and everybody was getting ready to go to college, and because I was comfortable where, drugs and alcohol were, that was my solution, I stayed. I stayed at home. I tried to keep up with appearances, make sure all you people didn't look at me funny, and all that kind of stuff. So I bottomed out really fast, let me put it that way. No IV drug user makes it out alive much less people bottom out quick. So I went to my first treatment center. I went to Laurelwood, right here in town. Went to the ER. I was there for 3 days, like a good addict. I told everybody what they wanted to hear, to get people kind of off my behind, and that's what I did. I went to my first 12-step meeting, and got introduced to me at the time, and still is in a lot of ways the solution for me. And it was the first time in my life where I identified with people like me that were being active members in recovery every day. And it was an opportunity for me to really let loose, connect, understand what it's like to live with this. And it was the best experience of my life. I mean, really, I felt like I was in college or something. It was really cool. Guys, I'll tell y'all, I was not willing to go to any length to stay clean at that moment. I hadn't reached my bottom yet. And when I say bottom, I mean not 6 feet in the grave. And I know. I used to ask myself, why did I make it? Why out of all my friends and all the people I grew up with, there's a lot of people that I know that have died from this disease. And I used to ask myself why, and guys, this moment tonight, this right here, this is the reason why I didn't. I get the opportunity to speak out and speak for my recovery, to be an example for those around me. Because I wasn't willing enough to stay clean at 18, 19 years old, I relapsed. I went back out. Because of the compulsion Dr. Blank had described, that obsession drove me. Once I picked back up, I had the inability to stop on my own. It took me 4.5 years to get back, multiple treatment centers, the same stuff, the same lies. You guys here, I'm sure, from your addict, your alcoholic, all those empty promises that they've broken, that was me. That was me. Jeffrey Gay passed away in 2012. It was the same night my daughter was born. It was a mix of emotions. I was in active addiction. About 3 months before that, I went down to the Bluff. I think we all know what that is. Went down to do some heroin for the first time. Never done it. Went down there, did a little, got a little blue, came back, thought, I'm good. I survived that. I didn't really know what I was doing. Did a little more, and I didn't wake up for a couple of days. I was told later. I got rushed to Northeast Georgia Medical Center. They hit me with Narcan. I did wake up in the ambulance shortly after, but I went back out on the way to Northeast Georgia, and in the midst of all that and trying to recover whatever was happening, they had told my parents that I wasn't going to make it. That there was nothing else they can do. Some people call it a God thing, greater conscious, whatever it may be, but something saved my life that day. I continue to use that power to be a person in long-term recovery today. It took me a couple more years to get clean. I needed to experience what I needed to experience in my journey as I walked through this addiction, barely escaping alive. Guys, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be the guy talking to you about addiction, about recovery. I need this. This is my life. This is some people that you know that is your life, and this is something that I'm extremely passionate about. And the difference between me now and when I was 19-year-old trying to get this thing is that I was not willing to go to any length to do whatever I had to do to stay clean one day at a time. I love you guys, and I really appreciate all you guys coming out tonight. Thank you for being a part of my story and my journey. Thank you.
Okay, well, we can just go home now, right? Thank you so much. That was a beautiful story and a real story, and a story that probably many of you in here could also share and talk about. A couple of things that he said that I think are really important, and that is that if you are an earth person, which means you don't have the disease of addiction, the way your brain experiences drugs and alcohol is very different than other people. Most people, when they take an opiate, we've got some pain management docs in here, our co-chair of the Think About It campaign initiative. I think we're supposed to change it. Dr. Slack could tell you that when most people take an opiate, they're grateful for the pain relief. But it makes them feel depressed and sluggish. They can't think. They just want to sleep. They get constipated. They might throw up. They itch a lot. And after a few days, people will often say, thanks, doc, appreciate the pain relief, but I don't want these pills anymore. And that's why the number one way in which people get pills to start with is from the family medicine cabinet. Because most people take a little bit and then they leave the rest of them in the cabinet, and that's where the kids get them. So please pick up one of these safe storage and disposal of medications. This is one of the things that you can do. I don't know if my slides work, do they? We'll see. I'll try. Oh, cool. Wrong. Oh, here we go. Okay, so the way that people who have the disease of addiction, if they take an opiate, guess what? As Mr. Nix talked about, gave him energy, makes him euphoric, Superman. He can do whatever he wants to do. It's a different experience. They have energy. They feel good. That's not how most people do. Most people, when you get a glass of wine, you get some dopamine. We all get it. We've all had dopamine. That makes us feel good. But when earth people, when their brain begins to understand that they're becoming neurologically impaired, their speech is going to be slurred, their balance is off, their gaits and reaction time's not right, that feedback loop in their deep center of their brain, the point at which these two lines meet, that part of their brain sends a message saying, stop sending out the dopamine. You don't need to be rewarded for this anymore. Stop. So they can actually leave a glass of wine half full that they paid good money for. People with addiction don't get that. They do not know how that's possible, that you could walk away and leave a half a glass of wine sitting there. Because their experience is a little is good, more is better, and I can't get enough. Till eventually something stops me. Not because I say I'm ready to stop, but because I get caught, my dealer gets busted, my mama finds out, I overdose, something outside them stops it. It's a different experience. Their brain is different, and you have to understand that. So the first rule of how to deal with this disease is you need to learn all you can about the drugs, about the disease, about your own family history, about your own genetic list. Knowing the symptoms of intoxication and withdrawal. One of the things that's not hilarious, because it's not too much hilarious about this disease, but very interesting, is that most of the time family members think that their loved one is using drugs when they're actually in withdrawal. When they're sick and they're grumpy and they're irritable and they don't want you around and get out of my face, they think, oh, they're using. Guess what? No, they aren't. They're in withdrawal. When they're happy and content and kind of chill, that's when they're using. You need to know what their eyes look like. You need to know what the paraphernalia looks like. There are lots of different sources to find this information. SAMHSA, great information, not only about the disease of addiction, but where to find treatment. The Council on Alcohol and Drugs, their drug abuse prevention program, the Think About It campaign, which co-sponsored this piece of information, and very important, and we thank all the folks here who are part of that, and Dallas for all of the work that he's done. NIDA, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, lists the drugs out separately, shows you what they look like, where to get them, what the names are that your loved ones may be calling them. The DEA, scary word, but they often have very good real-time information about drugs. You need to learn about that. Rule number 2 is don't feel comfortable if your child or your loved one is just using alcohol or pot. I hear that all the time. Well, it's just pot. Well, let's just say pot is a big problem. Alcohol is a big problem. And you can't be content that it's just pot or just alcohol, because we know that the correlation between people, not everybody who uses pot or alcohol is going to have a problem with heroin. But I'll bet, am I right? Most people who use heroin have also used alcohol and pot before. So don't think that it's just that. That's something serious to think about too. There's a wonderful book called The House of God by Samuel Shem, and it's a rule that doctors live by as they are going through internship. And the third rule of the House of God is take your own pulse first. If you are dealing with someone that you are worried about has a problem with drugs or alcohol, you need to make sure that you yourself are doing what you need to do to take care of yourself. Just like the airline says, put the mask on yourself first before you help somebody else. Make sure that you are okay. And you can do that by asking for help. Rule number 4. Ask for help. There are others that have experienced this, that have walked this path before you. The problem about the anonymous nature of 12-step recovery, for example, is that you may not know that your neighbor or your doctor or your fireman may also have this disease and may be in recovery. But you can ask for help. Addiction is a disease that thrives among secrets and by itself. People withdraw. They don't want to talk about it. They hope it goes away. But you have to know that you have to be strong for your loved ones, and that you have to be able, in spite of their anger, in spite of their insistence that everything's okay, you have to have the strength to be able to do the next right thing. And these are a couple of places that you might want to go to meet with other loved ones who have family members, who have friends that have been that have this disease of addiction. Al-Anon, Alateen, codependence, CODA programs. These are volunteer programs, and they are in your neighborhood. You can Google them. You can go to the websites. This is where you're going to find support, courage, help, and information. So I encourage you all to do that. I encourage you all to participate in these forums, because this isn't someone else's disease or someone else's responsibility. It affects all of us, and it is all of our responsibility to do the next right thing. Thank you.
So it's the greatest healthcare crisis in modern time, maybe going back 100 years. and it's man-made. And it's evolving every day. And we have to make decisions as to whether we want to change this or whether we want to live with this. Those decisions require commitment. They require everyone to say, I have a part. As long as it's someone else's problem, it will always be a problem. So before I start, I want to ask you a question. Last January, when the Falcons were headed to the Super Bowl, and we got all fired up, and we were all committed, there was a rallying cry that they used. What was that rally cry? Rise up. Rise up. And rise up is what it will take. It will take all of us rising up to make a difference, to be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. So I'm going to quickly go over some things, and hopefully there'll be something in here that you can take with you that you can do. There may be other things you say, that's not mine. So, looking at some of our community efforts here locally, we are now starting a parents' recovery network. We have a wonderful, caring community here in Gainesville. We're so blessed to live here. This new network will join together people that have lost loved ones who they themselves are in some stage of recovery. And they will band them together to help each other. Okay, that one's not working. Thank you. See if that's better. They will band them together to help each other's recovery. And they will go forward then to help in the greater community. We need to expand our local resources. We need more in counseling. I might mention that the Medical Center is starting a new peer support program that will pair someone like an Avery with someone who's coming through the ER from overdose. We need greater naloxone availability. Naloxone is the antidote. It's a miracle drug that reverses an opioid overdose. We need greater availability, and we need money for those who cannot afford to buy that on their own. And perhaps a local resource call line. I get questions from time to time. People call and say, I've got this situation. What should I do? Where should I go? Who do I call? And quite honestly, I don't know the answers. I think churches have a particular outreach because here we're dealing with a disease that not only affects the person and their health, it's the destructive nature of this disease throughout their family. If that family has any tear in their fabric, the addiction can tear that family apart. So, law enforcement, God bless you, law enforcement, but you know better than anyone here that we cannot arrest our way out of this epidemic. It takes a combination of humanitarian things and law enforcement to counteract what we're seeing in our communities. I want to recognize at this time some law enforcement people that have had a key part in the evolution of what we do here in Gainesville. John Durado started our drug court. He's back up here in the back. Judge Jason Deal was here earlier. He now runs our drug court. And Judge Kathy Goslin, who runs our mental health. These are the people that are at that forefront of dealing with the problems that we have in law enforcement with this. But our law enforcement here in Hall County, both our sheriff's department and police department, have gone through a program to be trained to be first responders. So they're not just arresting people and taking them to jail now, they're saving lives. And through Project Dan, that they were trained and equipped with naloxone. Here in Hall County, they have used those naloxone kits 24 times in the last 2 years. I'm asking you to please make overdose recovery a permanent part of your training program for every officer. Our naloxone is going to run out as we use it, and it's going to have to be replaced. So Project Dan is now over. The money is all gone. You're going to have to find in your budget to replace that naloxone, or you're going to have to find funding somewhere else. Please don't give up on that program. And I'll just comment that I'm seeing in other cities, other police districts, where they're looking at alternatives to arrest. That is, they are referring people that have been using drugs to treatment centers and keeping them out of jail. So our Georgia legislature, and we're so blessed to have our governor and the legislature we have, because they've been so active and been proactive in this. So I'm going to mention just a few of the bills that have been passed in recent years. First one, in 2014, the 911 medical amnesty. This bill said that if I'm using drugs for someone, I'm breaking the law. But if that person goes down and I call in good faith for medical assistance, neither of us would be arrested. We have amnesty. So it takes away that impediment to calling for help. It also made naloxone more widely available. In 2017, Senate Bill 121 provided that naloxone, which is a federal prescription drug, could be obtained here in Georgia without an individual prescription. You just walk into that pharmacy and say, I need naloxone because I might be at the scene of an overdose, and you can buy it. The Prescription Drug Monitoring Act is a very long-term and big piece of the drug program. And it's been passed now for about 4 years, but it was greatly enhanced this last year with House Bill 249. And that has made that a much more workable program and made participation in it. That bill had a number of other things in it, and one of which is that it requires prescribers of these narcotics to inform their patients of the risk of taking those narcotics. Thank you, legislatures, for those bills. So, I'm going to give you a little laundry list of other things I think that both federal and state should take a look at. We can't spend enough money to buy us out of this epidemic, but we can provide money for treatment for those that are suffering and have nowhere to go. Particularly, we have to continue to provide funding for the Prescription Drug Monitoring Program. We can't let that program fail. We have too much invested in it now. And I hope that that program will soon cross over state lines so that we're networking with other states on who's writing prescriptions, who's getting prescriptions filled, and tracking the abuses in our system. Let me explain this one. We have a situation today where at the federal government level, healthcare people in some cases are being paid on outcome, and they're being paid on patient satisfaction. Sounds like a good idea. But pain is one of those things of basic satisfaction. This is at counter purposes with reducing the amount we prescribe, and at the same time, that healthcare provider is saying, this person may give me a bad report, then I don't get paid. That type thing, that's at the federal level, needs to come out of the system. It's counterproductive. And here's the big one. There's no question that the history of this 20-year epidemic, that prescription pain pills have been and still are the driver of the epidemic. And only when we reduce the number of prescription pain pills that are in circulation will we have any hope of reducing this epidemic. So at this point, some 17 other states have passed laws that limit prescribing to no more than 7 days for short-term acute situations. There's a bill in the federal Senate right now to do the same thing. CDC says 3 days is adequate for many things, and 7 days is probably enough for anything of a short-term acute nature. We're not talking about a chronic pain such as cancer. So I'm asking us to look at that and say, what would it take to limit the amount of opiates that can be prescribed? CVS Pharmacy, just last week, took it on their own to do the same thing. They're going to limit to 7 days the amount of opiates prescribed for certain conditions. So that takes us down to the medical community. In the medical community, I can tell you it's easy to hang this on the doctors because they are the gatekeepers of prescriptions. Those people that prescribe are the ones who say you get 90 pills or you get 10 pills. But you have to go back to where this began in the 90s when the pharmaceutical companies were pushing these pills as being safe for pain, where the federal government was putting the fifth vital sign in that said, you've got to measure pain, the O to 10 scale. That's when that came in. What is your pain on an O to 10? Well, my pain's different than your pain. I think it's a bogus scale. And so the medical community then was being fed this. You've got to measure this. They started writing prescriptions. And the other part of that is us. We said, we don't want to hurt. We don't want to hurt. We're entitled to not hurt. So now we look back over that last 20 years and look at the destruction and the carnage down that road that led us to where we are today, where, as Deb Bailey has said, we're 5% of the population taking 80 to 90% of the pain meds. So I'm asking that the medical profession set out to reduce opiates prescribed by at least 50%. You understand, if we do that, that takes us back to where we're only twice as much as we were in 1999. We're still way up. Oh, that's the wrong button. And there's a lot of talk today about alternative pain measures, and there's something to that. And there are clinics now that are promoting this. I can deal with my pain in other ways beyond that 5 days of opiates maybe that I take. So the medical profession needs to focus on that, prepare for us people that can barely read something that we can understand as to what those alternate pain medicines are. We recently had the medical board in Georgia put forth a rule that prescribers now have to take 3 hours of prescribing education over a 2-year period. And I would suggest that needs to be done now. Why wait and have the risk of inappropriate prescribing take other people down the path that Avery or so many others have gone through? And I've already mentioned pain as the fifth vital sign. I think the Joint Commission has already dropped that, and that needs to go away. That leads to more epidemic. And that last one was, we need uniform guidelines. House Bill 249 says prescribers have to tell us what the risk of opiates are. That's somewhere between, y'all be careful, or a 20-page technical study. So we need a paper, 1 page, that tells me the risk of what those are so I can make my own decisions. Now we come to the really big one. We thought the doctors were the big one, but we're really the big one. We're like no other country on earth because we take most of the pain pills on earth. We take today, on the average, 4 times the amount of pain medicines that a person in Europe would take. So we feel we're entitled to that. That's been the way we're brought up. And changing that is not going to be easy for us. But here's what I'm telling you. Besides what the doctors and the prescribers tell you or prescribe, we've always relied on the doctor prescribed it, it must be safe. No, you have to make your own decisions to either eliminate or reduce the use of opiate pain pills. A doctor may say, or a prescriber may say, here's 90 pills because you had your knee surgery. And you have to decide if you're going to take 90 pills or you're going to get by with 10 pills. And you lock the rest of them up, or you just say, no thank you, pharmacist, just give me 20. I'll lock them up, and I'll take them if I have to have them. If you don't make the effort to reduce your use of pain pills, it will not happen anytime soon, short of legislation that makes it happen. We have over 1 million prescribers in this country. They're not going to all change overnight. You make your own decision. Seek out alternate pain management. Don't share your medicines with others. You know that. It's illegal. It's dangerous. Dispose of your medicines properly. We have a drop box outside. We have 4 or 5 drop boxes in this county. And become educated about the signs of abuse, because you need to be observant of those in your family. If you think there's abuse going on, there's a good chance it's worse than you think. A couple more. If you've had an addiction in your family, get rid of the shame and the stigma associated with that. This is a cultural thing with us. It's a stigma. It's a moral failing. It's a character failing. You've heard this is a disease. Get off of it. It's a disease. Treat it as a disease. Be willing to talk about it. Be vocal about this epidemic with others. You can do that. That's something everyone in this room can do. You can be an advocate. You can put it on social media. You can tell your friends. And then I want you to learn, take 10 minutes to learn the 3 steps. What are the 3 steps? This is a brand new program that is a successor or a sequel to Project Dan. Project Dan trained law enforcement. Almost 5,000 law enforcement officers in Georgia have been trained for overdose recovery and been equipped with naloxone. We now have a program called 3 Steps launching tonight. This is on your website that's in your bulletin, drugfreehall.org, drugfreehall.org. And the 3 steps are: call 911, medical emergency law will protect you. 2, administer naloxone. You can now, because of the new law, walk into a pharmacy and buy it without a prescription. It does cost. It's not cheap. And 3, know some basic first aid that can help extend that life to help arise. 3 steps to save a life. Again, that's at drugfreehall.org. Here's a quick clip of 3 steps to save a life. When you go to that website, this is our very own Dr. Tennant Slack. When you go to the website, you're going to see 2 videos. This video is 6.5 minutes long. That's adequate to train you in an emergency of what to do. The second video that will be on that website is about 25 minutes long, and it's the one that we use to train law enforcement. Take time to watch this video, and then the second part of it, well, I'll hit that button again. The second part of it is a phone PDF. So I have on my phone a checklist that goes with me everywhere. And this checklist has steps. And this leads me through exactly what I need to do in the event of an overdose. So I've watched this 6.5 minute movie. I've learned from that. I carry this with me everywhere I go. If I'm at the scene of an overdose, I pull this out and I've got it. Instructions for that, again, on the website. So that takes us then to one more thing. I want you to say it again. What are we going to do? Rise up. You have to believe that. But now I want to ask you a question. What would you do if you were at the scene of an overdose tonight?
my God, you were so right not to go. That party was the worst. The guys did nothing but watch the game, and I was trapped listening to April complain about her job, her car, her mom, her hair. Oh, I hope you guys didn't eat all the ice cream. Allison? Oh, Allison! Allison? Allison! Oh, God! Allison! Jason!
What?
Help me! Allie!
What are you doing?
She won't wake up. I don't think she's breathing.
What?
Oh, God.
Allie? Allie. Allie.
Help me! Please help me! What is it? Something's wrong with Allison. We can't get her to wake up.
Have you called 911?
No.
Call 911.
I can't be here.
What do you mean? What did you take?
You don't understand.
Jason, if you're saving a life, the law protects you.
What did she take?
I don't know how many.
Call 911. Rachel, there's a small white box of Narcan in my cabinet above the sink. Get it.
Hello? We have an emergency. It's my friend. She won't wake up. I don't think she's breathing. I don't know. Lakewood apartment 315. I don't know. Does she have a pulse?
No.
Oh, no. Please hurry. Oh, what is that?
Narcan.
Why do you have that? Are you a nurse?
No, I'm a mother.
What? Narcan? In her nose? Does she have a pulse?
No.
He says you have to do compressions.
Come on, Allison.
Oh, God, please, Allie.
Go and look for the ambulance. Come on.
Miguel Hernandez had just turned 18. After a football injury, he became addicted to pain pills.
Greg Stevens was in law school, and everyone thought he was living his dream. No one knew that he was fighting for his life.
Lisa May was her high school's homecoming queen and point guard on the basketball team. I met her on a mission trip to South America.
Mark Johnson built houses. Maybe he built yours. Chronic back pain pushed him into an addiction he battled for years.
In the moments of crisis, no one called 911.
No one knew CPR.
No one had heard of Narcan.
No one knew.
Miguel Hernandez was my brother.
Greg Stevens was my son.
Lisa May was my friend.
Mark Johnson was my dad.
Come on.
Oh, they're here.
Oh, it's okay. It's all right. It's going to be okay, Allison.
Can you tell me what you're doing for her?
I don't know how many she took, but she didn't have a pulse, and we did Narcan and compressions.
Okay.
Is she gonna be okay? Is Allie gonna be all right?
You probably saved her life.
I'm going to ask you to do one more thing. And we all go home. And when you go home, remember there was something here that you can take home. Just be an advocate. Just take care of your own medicines. Just encourage your legislature to do the right things. Encourage your medical physicians, etc., to do the right thing. But now I'm going to ask certain groups of you to stand. I want you to remain standing. Just bear with me. First, anyone here who has lost a loved one in their family to alcohol or drug abuse or addiction, would you stand? Anyone here whose family, near or extended, is still dealing with that drug and alcohol abuse and addiction, would you stand? Anyone here who has had a friend or associate in business who has struggled or been lost to alcohol or drug addiction, would you stand? This is the face of the addiction. Thank you all for coming. Good night.